Well, a warm welcome along to this week's Assist, sponsored by Free Super Tips. I'm Warren Ashurst, and once again, I'm joined this week by Mark Langdon and Dan Childs to take you through the weekend's action. After a couple of dramatic days in the Champions League, of course, it's back to domestic matters. We've got the small matter of the fact that the first piece of silverware of the domestic season gets handed out. Plus, we've also got plenty of Premier League and EFL action to look forward to. Guys, we can't start, though, without looking back at what's been a fascinating midweek of Champions League action. Mark, we'll start with you first in terms of looking at Tuesday. Liverpool crashing out at the hands of PSG on penalties. We mentioned a couple of times over the last few weeks on the Champions League show that they were something of a dark horse, PSG, and they're now looking like real contenders.
Yeah, absolutely. Played very well in the first leg. The doubt I had about PSG, and it's one I've had for about 10 years, is like, can they do it when the going gets tough? And away from home, like, what's their mentality like? And there are a few sort of harder places really to go than Anfield for a big European night. They withstood Liverpool's early pressure. Scored a great breakaway goal, always looked lively on the counter-attack. When Liverpool were on top in the second half, again, they kind of just dug in and made sure that they were solid defensively. Some of the more attacking players, Kvaratskhelia, and Barcola, sort of dropped back and helped out their fullbacks and sort of did all the things that PSG don't normally do. And then in extra time, again, I thought they were the better side. Doué nearly won it on a couple of occasions. They looked the team more likely to win. And then when it went to penalties, it's never a bad thing to have a giant like Donnarumma protecting your goal. So I think overall, PSG deserved to win across the two legs. Liverpool played better in the second leg than they did the first one. And, Aston Villa, have done brilliantly to get to the quarterfinals. But if you're Paris Saint-Germain, you will, having beaten Liverpool, you'll expect to beat PSG, to beat Villa, and then you're in a semi-final. So, it's been a really, I think, top job from Luis Enrique to sort of change the mentality at PSG, because at the start of the season and sort of first couple of months, I don't think anybody could have said that they fancied PSG to win the Champions League. They looked a bit of a mess.
Yeah, they did. And that Manchester City victory seems to have boosted confidence from there on in. Dan, we shouldn't be surprised, I suppose, that Real Madrid have got to the quarterfinals, but the circumstances of them getting there was quite controversial. I don't know if anybody's seen the press conference with Diego Simeone. He's absolutely fuming about the penalty that was given against, in terms of Julian Alvarez scoring it, and said that he had touched it with both feet. I mean, I think I've seen the replay about 7 or 8 times now, and I still can't work out what happened.
I just think they'll be absolutely delighted to get through that tie. I mean, to draw, your great rivals in the round of 16, you're going to be looking at that, thinking, knowing that it's on here. It doesn't surprise me that it went all the way and had such a dramatic finish. But I think having got through that tie, again, I mean, as Mark's mentioned with PSG, with the quality they've got, you'd have to consider them as, arguably the favourites to go on and win the competition. I think PSG, going back to them, I just think for their the greatest thing you can say about them is they're probably the first team this season that over 2 legs actually made Liverpool look fairly ordinary at times, and I think that probably says more about PSG than it does about Liverpool. We know how strong Liverpool have been in the Premier League, but Liverpool were my pick before going into the round of 16. I wouldn't be surprised now, as Mark said, what I saw off the ball and on the ball from PSG and some of the quality they got individuals. It wouldn't surprise me if they went all the way.
Final word for you, Mark, on the Champions League. Who are you looking at now? Who would be your favourites to go all the way?
Well, I mean, at the start of the competition, sort of on those early Champions League assists, it was Bayern and Barcelona. So looking good from that point of view. At the round of 16, I picked Barcelona. I still like what Barcelona are doing. I think they'll stroll through against Dortmund in the quarterfinals. A stroll might be a little bit sort of harsh, given that you've got to, just play in that atmosphere in Dortmund. But player for player, Barca are much better, and I would fancy Barca to have the measure of Inter or Bayern in the semi-finals. I think they're not brilliantly defensively, but they're decent in midfield. So much quality, Pedri, Frankie de Jong, two of those players in there. And then up front, Rafinha, Lamine Yamal and Lewandowski is, it isn't far short of being the best in the competition. In La Liga, a lot of unexpected goals, are considered the best team in the league. And they've got a big game against Atletico at the weekend that might sort of go a long way to deciding how that Spanish title goes. But Barcelona for me.
Okay, well, we'll move on now to domestic matters as promised. And the big match of the week is the EFL Cup final. Wembley Stadium, the venue on Sunday at 4:30 for Newcastle against Liverpool. In terms of the prices, Liverpool 13-20. It's 15-4 Newcastle and 31-10 the draw in 90 minutes. In terms of what we've had in the build-up to this, Dan, obviously two major blows for Newcastle to have no Anthony Gordon or Lewis Hall due to suspension and injury. I mean, that's two significant players to take out their team.
Yeah, I think because on the Liverpool side as well, they've lost. They only got what sounds like one injury out of the PSG game. Canate, they seem to expect to be okay, but I think from their point of view, Alexander-Arnold could be quite a loss as well because they're now down, both their right backs, so that's an issue for them as well. But I do think Liverpool, their squad strength is stronger than Newcastle's, and Newcastle they're having a reasonably strong season in the Premier League. I always think these cup finals for them, they've got such a long record now of losing them, haven't they? They've had five major cup final losses in a row, and I just think it's such a big deal whenever Newcastle get to a cup final. You almost worry that they put too much pressure on themselves, but it's a tough enough look. Irrespective of how they handle pressure, it's a tough enough game for them anyway against Liverpool.
In terms of lifting the trophy, by the way, Liverpool 3-1 on, Newcastle 12-5. In order to lift the first silverware of the season. I mean, just how much of that PSG game have taken out of Liverpool, Mark? I mean, Dan mentioned there, Trent Alexander-Arnold, very unlikely, you'd think, to play on Sunday.
Yeah, it definitely will have hit Liverpool, but emotionally and physically, to go out of the Champions League wouldn't have sort of been on the radar, I don't think, for them. When it was sort of coming to after they finished, what was it, first in the league phase, so they're out of that competition early. I think Tuesday to Sunday is about as good as you can get, really, in terms of a break. It would have been much worse had it been Thursday, Sunday, or Wednesday, Saturday. So, Tuesday, Sunday gives them enough time, I think, to get energy in the legs. He might freshen it up front. Gakpo, I would expect him potentially to come into that front three. Someone like Curtis Jones was on the bench, and whenever he's played this season has looked decent. So, it wouldn't be a disaster if he was in the Liverpool side. Even Tsimikas at left back, if you really wanted to rotate one or two, if Robertson's coming maybe towards the end of his career, and you wonder about his fitness. But I think the depth is there from Liverpool to rotate you're not going to rotate for a final unless you need to. But if one of the two of those players are sort of still feeling the pinch, I think there's enough in reserve for that not to be a factor in deciding the final. I mean, let's not forget when they won the competition last year. I mean, they finished the game with just a bunch of kids, didn't they, against Chelsea, and they still won. I do agree with Dan that sort of it feels like sort of some teams are born to win trophies and some teams are just not. And I say that as a Spurs fan who's sort of been in a similar situation to Newcastle, where you go into these finals almost expecting to lose. And Liverpool and even Manchester United, United have been in the doldrums for a while now. And yet when they come to cup finals, they're able to win them, a reasonable amount of the time. And Liverpool is... I'm sort of going down cliche territory, but it's sort of in their DNA, isn't it, to win trophies? And I think Newcastle have got a battle against that, as well as the fact that, that there is a class difference as well.
Yeah, and previous final experience, of course, in recent years as well. I know Newcastle did get to a final not that long ago, but Liverpool, it seems annually recently, have been playing in a final one way or another. It just remains to be seen what your best bets are going to be for Sunday's final. Dan, we'll start with you. Where are you looking in terms of the value here?
I'm going to go. I think Liverpool odds on in the 90. I do think they'll probably win, but I'd like to boost that up. So I'm going to go Liverpool and under 3.5 goals. I don't think there'll be a ton of goals here. Newcastle are certainly one of their strengths is defensively. They're quite a hard team to break down. Liverpool, I agree with Mark that the Tuesday to Sunday gives them a chance to get energy back in their legs, but you still wouldn't be surprised if they're a little bit off, their top standard. I just think for Liverpool though, if it had a Premier League game after this, going out of the Champions League, I think there may have been an issue. There may have been a problem, but it's to have such a massive game mentally. It's not difficult to get up for a cup final, is it? And the Premier League's pretty much wrapped up. You could certainly argue, this is their biggest game left of the season now for Liverpool, and I don't think that is going to be difficult for them to get up for. They are 23 points above Newcastle in the Premier League. Another thing we haven't mentioned, 17 games against Newcastle now without losing, won 7 of the last 8. All these mental things are things that Newcastle have got to overcome, and they've got to do it without Anthony Gordon, who is a very important player for them. And so I just think Liverpool be a bit too much nous and too much quality.
Yeah, there's not been many goals, Mark, in recent EFL Cup finals. Do we think it will be the same again?
Yeah, I'm going to go for under 2.5 goals at 13-10. 7 of the last 10 League Cup finals have been under 2.5. 3 of the last 6 have finished 0-0 at full time. Only both teams, the scorers landed in 1 of the last 7. And, we've seen when Liverpool have had big games. The 2 PSG ones are the prime example of that. Things just do tighten up. It's just a natural instinct, I think, for more caution to be involved. And usually cup finals, the under 2.5 sort of shortens right up, and it hasn't done on this occasion. And I sort of wouldn't be surprised if it was a bit of a grind, with Liverpool probably just about edging it.
Just a reminder then that the EFL Cup final is at 4:30 on Sunday, Newcastle against Liverpool. And because of that final, we've got just the 8 Premier League games rather than the usual 10 to look ahead to. But we will start with Saturday's action, because there are 4 games kicking off at 3 o'clock. And we'll start at Goodison Park, where Everton play host to West Ham. Everton 21-20 to collect the win here. West Ham 29-10 and the draw 11-5. Mark, we've talked about West Ham a bit over recent weeks, and just as it starts to look like they're getting in the right direction, they lost against Newcastle at home on Monday, potentially didn't play as well as we'd have expected them maybe to do. So how do you see this one going?
Yeah, they let us, let me down against Newcastle. I laid Newcastle in that game. But I think a draw is the way to go with this one. I'm not going to just jump off the sort of Hammers bandwagon, because, as you say, they weren't at their best against Newcastle. But Souček missed an absolute sitter, was in like the first minute or whatever. And, if that goes in, you've got a completely different game. And I still think that they're on the right sort of track under Graham Potter. Everton, only 1 defeat in their last 9, but it is now 4 draws in 5, and just wonder if they've got enough of a killer instinct to win the game at the price that they are. And I think that's the key thing for me here. Everton, always a bit nervy because of their lack of goals in terms of backing them to win at these sort of prices.
Yeah, I think that probably is the thing that would put you off in terms of the home side, Dan, if you were thinking about an Everton win, is that lack of attacking threat maybe.
Yeah, I've got the same bet. Going to go for the draw. Everton are, quite a while now. No Calvert-Lewin, no Njai. They're not, blessed with lots of fantastic attacking options. And David Moyes, given what he's got there to work with at the moment, I think it's done an unbelievable job really since he's gone in there. A lot of people, myself included, thought, a change from Dyche to Moyes, probably not a great deal is going to happen any different there, but he certainly has improved the standards and the results with, without really the chance to add much in terms of new players. So West Ham, I was disappointed with them as well on Monday. It was another one of them kind of passive home performances, wasn't it? They started kind of bright, had them early chances that Mark mentioned, and then were happy to kind of sit in and ended up, couldn't really have any complaints about losing the game. But they are gradually improving, I feel, under Potter. Probably carry a bit more of an attacking threat actually in Everton, but I kind of feel they maybe won't have enough to get the win with Everton being unbeaten for so long. So the draw for me.
I think Moyes is going to fancy it though, isn't he? I mean, he's always kind about West Ham, but feel like, I feel like he sort of feels like he doesn't get the respect he deserves for winning that European trophy with them.
So the David Moyes derby then at Goodison Park at 3 o'clock on Saturday, one of 4 3 o'clock games. Up next, it's to Portman Road for Ipswich against Nottingham Forest. Ipswich 11-4 to claim the victory. It's evens Forest and 5-2 the draw. Dan, we'll start with you with this one. Keep saying last chance saloon every week for Ipswich, it appears, but it's now getting to the point where really this home form has to completely flip around if they're going to have any chance of survival.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Forest here. I've got to admit, I'm not. It wouldn't be my most confident bet of the week, but I just feel that there's so much pointing to it being a good price. I worry a bit sometimes about Forest against lesser teams. I do feel that they're better, sometimes like against City when they're kind of soaking it up and causing problems on the counter attack and set pieces. But I do just think that they'll do the basics a lot better than Ipswich. Ipswich have a habit of kind of finding ways to lose at the moment. Tight games, concede a lot of goals constantly. I think Hutchinson, was one of their one bits of quality in terms of creativity since he's been injured. That's kind of lessened their attacking threat as well. So I just think Forest. That was a big win for them as well against Manchester City. I didn't fancy them going into it, but they got 3 games, Premier League games without winning going into it. That was a massive victory, puts them right back in the thick of the race for the top 4, and I think they'll get over the line at Portman Road.
I'll be honest, Mark, I'm slightly surprised to see that Forest aren't odds on to win this game.
Yeah, I think you could definitely make a case for them being odds on. If you just look at the league table, I still feel like there's a bit of disbelief about Forest's sort of league position, and at some stage it will slow down. And I think that Forest are better on the counter attack, but that might actually suit them in this game because Ipswich are fairly attacking and not kind of your stereotypical relegation candidate that gets 11 players behind the ball all occasions. And actually, Forest away to teams of a similar ability of Ipswich have been very reliable this season. Beat Wolves 3-0, Leicester 3-1, Southampton 1-0. So I think if you shop around, you might even get a bit of 11-10, which I think is fair enough.
Up next, it is to the Etihad Stadium. Manchester City against Brighton. City 4-6 to claim the victory. It's 100-30 the draw and 7-2 Brighton. Just as we think Manchester City are getting somewhere near where we'd expect them to be, Mark, they then go and, as I say, lose at Forest. Not, the biggest surprise in the world considering how Forest are doing, but again, City slightly unpredictable.
Yeah, I thought it was a poor performance from City. Too slow in possession, too easy to defend against, and it was. I don't think necessarily the Forest goal was coming, but I couldn't see where City's goal was coming from. And then I think Ederson should have done better. He's near post, and on another day they get away with a 0-0. I think they are at least defending better now. You're not able to run through them with sort of the same ease that we saw. Nico Gonzalez and Kershikov at the back have made a difference in that regard. I actually thought that Man City were an okay price here. I'm not going to go overboard about it, but they have won 6 of their 8 at home in 2025, and that includes victories over Chelsea and Newcastle. I would argue are similar, maybe even slightly better than Brighton's. Definitely around about that level. And the 2 defeats were against Real Madrid and Liverpool. And for all that Brighton are improving, I'm not going to put them in that bracket just yet.
Okay, I was looking at the sort of team news from last week, Dan, and a little bit surprised that Marmoush didn't get another start. But at home this time around, he might be somebody that Pep Guardiola looks to.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he comes back into the side. I'll go the other way here. I'm going to go Brighton or draw, double chance. I just think Brighton often play better against a better team. They've had a couple of draws with Arsenal this season. The recent, a couple of victories in the cup and in the league at home to Chelsea. I worry more about Brighton sometimes when they're going off at short odds. At home sometimes against teams in the middle to lower part of the table. Against the big teams, even the 2-1 loss when they lost at Liverpool, I thought they played very well in that game. Newcastle away in the FA Cup recently went there and got the job done. They're not daunted by these games. Got loads, in their favour going forward. Carry a big threat. I agree City have looked a better, more reliable side since the turn of the year, but still, I mean, these teams are very close to each other in the table. City are getting dragged into an almighty scrap now for this top 4, top 5, whichever it's going to be. There's probably 8 teams now chasing those spots, 3rd, 4th and 5th. And, the pressure's on really here. I would just take Brighton or the draw at the odds.
Yeah, Brighton, one of those teams, of course, who are battling it out for a top 5 finish. Saw Tony Bloom at Cheltenham on the TV this week, and he'll be licking his lips at the prospects of Champions League football for Brighton, I'm sure, next season. The 4th and final 3 o'clock game on Saturday is at St Mary's when Southampton take on Wolves. 11-4 the home side. It's evens the visitors and 12-5 the draw. It's difficult to try and say anything else about the Southampton town at the moment, but obviously this could be huge for Wolves if they could gain the 3 points.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with that evens Wolves. I mean, sometimes look, let's get it out there first. Matheus Cunha being out is a big deal for Wolves. He's a massive player for them, still suspended at the moment, but I think sometimes you can focus too much on one player, and the difference. Although these teams are 20th and 17th in the table, there's a big gap in quality between the sides. One is a competitive Premier League team that's well on course to survive. The others, Southampton, have just been completely out of their depth, and goal difference in home games for Southampton is -28. They're just not competing, and I mean the Liverpool game, Liverpool kind of dropped their guard a little bit, didn't they, last weekend? Southampton performed well, got in front, and then kind of collapsed, didn't they, in the second half? So I don't see any big improvement from them. Wolves to get the win for me.
Hard to make a case elsewhere, isn't it, Mark?
Yeah, I wouldn't be backing Southampton. I am one of those, though, that kind of looked at the Wolves price, liked it, and then just got put off by Cunha's absence. So I'm going to play Wolves in a different way. Manetzi, who scored last week against Everton, he's 9-1 first goal scorer. I think he's been described as a box-to-box midfielder when they brought him in, but he's definitely playing in a more advanced role at the moment. Had 3 shots last week. 2 of those were on target against Everton, and we don't need to sort of tell the listeners or viewers just how bad Southampton are defensively. So good opportunities, I think, for Wolves to score, but it's just picking that one player that's going to do it, and I landed on him.
Okay, well, we'll move on to the 5:30 game now on Saturday evening. It's the Vitality Stadium for Bournemouth against Brentford. Just looking at some stats on this before we started the show, and certainly there's been goals in the last 3 meetings between the two sides, 3 or more goals to be exact, and maybe we might get another goal fest this time. Bournemouth 7-10 to claim the victory. Brentford 100-30, and the draw is 16-5. Mark, what are you looking at here?
Well, first of all, I've done a column for Saturday's Racing Post. It'll be up online on racingpost.com on Friday about Iraola and what he's doing at Bournemouth. That I think is very special. I think that the style of play, the way that he's going about it, like they're second for long balls in the Premier League this season, behind only Everton, but they're not a long ball team. They're just really smart. When teams press them, they just knock it over the top of them. So bright in forward areas. I mean, they absolutely destroyed Tottenham for a lot of last week, and yet they've come away with a 2-2 draw. And I'm going to go for a draw again here. I make no secret of the fact that I'm a massive sort of Bournemouth sort of loving merchant, really. But they do make me nervous at short prices. So they've lost at Leicester, and at home they couldn't beat Palace when Palace weren't playing great. They couldn't beat West Ham when West Ham weren't playing great. And they've failed to beat Wolves twice. I know they had a player sent off in one of those games, and then they dominated the FA Cup game, but they didn't win either of them. And so on that basis, I'm going for a draw, but I think Bournemouth have got a struggle on their hands to keep Iraola beyond the end of this season. I think there will be bigger clubs all over Europe looking at him.
One big plus for Bournemouth down in the last couple of weeks is Evan Nielsen being back. He scored twice in the last 2 games. Is his appearance going to be enough to see them gain a win here?
I'm going to go with the same bet and go with a draw. And that, again, that is, without, I mentioned as well how much I like Bournemouth. I mean, absolutely. They outclassed Spurs last week. I mean, if it had finished 4-1 or 5-1, honestly think that would have been a reasonable reflection of the game. But they didn't get the result, and they've now gone 3 games now in the Premier League without winning. And Brentford they're such awkward opponents, aren't they? And they're really getting their away form going now. Earlier on in the season, it was all the home form. Now they've won 4 in a row away from home. Got that counter-attacking threat. Damsgaard is with his eye for a pass, and they're defending quite well as well. They're a tough team to break down when they sit with that low block in away games and look to counter-attack. So I just think they're awkward opponents, and I agree. I wouldn't be rushing to back Bournemouth at odds on. The draw looks a big price to me.
Well, that's Saturday covered. Let's move on now to the 3 Premier League games on Sunday. And undoubtedly, the biggest league game of the weekend is at the Emirates, where Arsenal play host to Chelsea. The Gunners 4-5 to claim the victory here. It's 7-2 Chelsea and 13-5 the draw. Earlier in the week, Dan, I was quite surprised that Arsenal were actually even bigger price than that at one stage to claim the victory. But off the back of that Champions League success, they were able to rest a few players on Wednesday night as well. Does this play into the Gunners' hands?
I'm not so. I mean, resting players obviously helps, gives them their key men will be fresh for the weekend. But no, I'm in danger of getting a sore bottom because I'm going to sit on the fence again here and go for the draw again. I just think at the moment, until they get Saka back, I know Martinelli's back in the mix now, and that's a boost for Arsenal. But if you actually take out that the extraordinary 7-1 away to PSV, their recent league performances have not been that great, have they? I mean, even I thought the Man United game last weekend was a glorious chance to go and win a match, and in the end it was quite even. I think Man United actually narrowly won even on the XG. So they're not shooting the lights out at the moment in the Premier League. Arsenal, starting to having a little run where they're not used to winning games. And Chelsea, I mean, they're hard to judge in the last 2 games because they've played 2 poor sides, haven't they? Southampton and Leicester. Before that, more difficult games. They lost 3-0 at Brighton and 2-1 at Aston Villa. However, I do think they've got a lot of quality in the side. They're awkward opponents. I just feel that they'll pick up a point here.
So, Mark, we go into this game with, I suppose, a little bit of a cloud over maybe Cole Palmer at the moment with the goal drought that he's in. I know he wasn't well last week and he kind of pushed himself to play through illness, but Chelsea need him to be firing.
They do, yeah. I mean, obviously he was called Cold Palmer earlier on in the season because of his ice cold finishing, and now it's Cold Palmer because he's gone off the hot streak and you can't buy a goal at the moment, even missing penalties. Now, I mean, as you say, he was ill for that Leicester game. There's a doubt over whether he plays on Thursday against Copenhagen. I think there's a bit of illness in the Chelsea camp, actually. A few players have gone down with it. I don't know if you heard the story. There's someone in the Chelsea camp, I think it's the doctor or chef or somebody, anyway, that's Danish, and the suggestion that maybe he's trying to help out Copenhagen. But I expect Chelsea to. I hope this doesn't age terribly, but I expect Chelsea to get through on Thursday. I don't think they'll need to use up all of their energy, but I'm still going for an Arsenal win because I just can't trust Chelsea in these big away games this season. They lost at Liverpool, they lost at Man City, they lost at Brighton and Aston Villa. They went out of the cups at Brighton and Newcastle as well. So I'm going to keep the faith with Arsenal. They let me down last week, but I think Martinelli's return offers them a bit more up front than what they had from the start at United last week. And Arsenal win, not with any huge amount of confidence because of their lack of goal threat, but yeah, Chelsea in these big away games, until they actually pull off a performance, I'm struggling to trust them to do so.
Not quite lasagna gate, but certainly concerns for Chelsea.
Danish pastry gate, yeah.
Ahead of that trip to the Emirates on Sunday. It's one of 2 1:30 kickoffs in the Premier League. The other is an all-London affair as well at Craven Cottage, where Fulham take on Spurs. Fulham evens to gain the victory. Tottenham 5-2 and the draw 14-5. You mentioned earlier on, Mark, how Spurs were second best against Bournemouth last week. Still injury problems affecting the camp at the moment as well. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, I'm going to go for a Fulham win. They battered Tottenham at Craven Cottage last season. I thought they were the better team at what I'll still refer to as White Hart Lane this season as well, even though it finished in a draw, and actually Fulham finished with 10 men as well. I just think Tottenham are going to put absolutely everything into the Europa League game against RZ Alkmaar on Thursday. So I'm not sure who will play, because they've got these players coming back from injury, Romero, Van der Ven and Solanke being the three key ones. If they start on Thursday, can they start again on Sunday? There's one goal in it at the moment. That means there's a fair chance, I think, of extra time to be played on Thursday as well, if you're looking at sort of what the most likely outcome is. So I think with everything we know at the moment, it might change closer to kickoff, but sort of trying to second guess the team selection and the result from Thursday, I mean, Fulham are fair enough at the price they are.
Yeah, Fulham have been squeezed a little bit, Dan, from the last couple of days. Is that understandable?
Yeah, I just get a feeling that the squeeze might have actually gone a little bit too far, and I'm going to back Spurs to get something and avoid defeat, and that's despite, I mean, they were borderline shambolic, they were at times against Bournemouth, were outclassed for large parts of the game. But I'm just looking at the odds, and I remember when they went to Brentford, a similar sort of difficulty level of game, and Spurs had a much weaker squad actually available at that time, more players out injured, and went there, and won the game at a venue that's not too intimidating. Fulham, I would put in a similar category. I mean, Fulham have only actually had 5 home Premier League wins this season, so I get a bit nervy about backing them at, around evens, those sorts of odds. I just feel that Spurs may be a bit overpriced here. My thoughts on this are based on what I feel may happen in the AZ game. I think if Spurs get knocked out, then I struggle to see them going and getting a result at Fulham. But I do think they'll find a way somehow to get through that, and I think they will go then reasonably strong. You've got an international break coming up after that, so there's no sort of Prem game coming up. I think they'll go with they won't want to lose the momentum if they get it on Thursday, and I'm just going to go at the odds. I'll go with Spurs to get a result.
Well, the traditionists will be absolutely livid. There's a 7 p.m. kickoff on Sunday evening to wrap up the Premier League weekend, and it's at the King Power Stadium where Leicester play host to Manchester United. The Foxes as big as 7-2 to claim the victory here. It's 5-6 Manchester United, and the draw is 5-2 after a week of what I'd class as interesting interviews, shall we say, with Sir Jim Radcliffe and talk of a new stadium to replace Old Trafford. Dan, they've got to get their mind focused back on playing matters now.
Yeah, and the main focus this week is obviously going to be the Sociedad game, in a similar position to Spurs, where the league is almost incidental now, isn't it? I mean, they're going to kind of finish somewhere probably lower mid table. I know for Man United, every league game, Premier League game, should be seen as important, but I've got to admit, I was struggling with this game to try and come up with something, because Leicester, I think, are a very poor side, arguably just as poor as Southampton, and United. It's probably the worst time to be looking at Backham, when they've got quite a thin squad at the moment. Anyway, lots of injuries. All their focus is going to be on Sociedad. That game could even go to extra time, and you don't see them being, anywhere near their best away to Leicester. Is that going to be good enough to win the game? Possibly, yes, because Leicester are such a poor side. But for me, I just see a poor game here. Leicester recently seem to be trying to sort of tighten up, and they are conceding a few less goals, but they're offering next to nothing every time I see them going forward. So I think a tight, low-scoring game. I noticed under 2.5 goals was odds against. That's going to be my selection.
It feels, Mark, as if it's about the 12th time these two teams have faced this season. Obviously they've taken on each other quite a few occasions, and Leicester have come out on the losing side. And, well, if ever there's a chance now for Leicester to at least sort of bridge a gap between themselves and the teams at the bottom end of the table, it's against a Manchester United team struggling, but also, of course, having had that big game on Thursday night.
Yeah, so obviously the Thursday game is the only thing that's sort of stopping me thinking United are a very good bet to win this game. And it's not really to do with Manchester United. It's just to do with the fact that, I mean, Leicester, and we've been saying it, like, even when they were doing reasonably well, I think we've been saying on the show every Thursday that they were getting away with it under Steve Cooper. They're not getting away with it anymore. I know Childs won't be watching the game. He has a traditional Sunday evening curry every week, so he even misses Spurs games if they're kicking off on late on a Sunday. But what I look at here from Leicester's point of view, their last 5 Premier League games, their expected goals for is 1.5. So you don't need to be great at maths to know that that's averaging out at 0.3 per game. I mean, 0.3 as an average is like hopeless. And if they carry on at this standard, just difficult to see where the chances will come from. And I don't think United will have to be like even remotely good to win or remotely sort of fit. Whether it goes to extra time, penalties, that type of thing is always a concern when we're previewing a game on a Thursday morning ahead of the Sunday game. But I do feel like Premier League matches are important to Amorim as he builds up for next season. I would sort of say for Postecoglou, he probably knows what his likely fate is. And I think Amorim, we'll be looking to finish the Premier League season strongly. And this is a good opportunity for another 3 points.
And you'd have to say United probably look better away from home than they do at home at the moment as well. So that wraps up then the Premier League weekend. Next up, it's the EFL.
Do you want football free bets? All the best offers from your favourite bookmakers could be found in one place. Check out racingpost.com/free-bets to find out more. Racing Post, stay ahead of the field.
Well, on to the EFL as promised now, and our match in focus this week is a big derby game. It's a 12:30 kickoff on Sunday at Hillsborough for Sheffield Wednesday against Sheffield United. We'll go through the prices in a moment, but Dan, Wednesday have kind of slipped up in recent weeks. They've still got some slim hopes of reaching the playoffs, but it's now 7 points, I think it is, off the top 6 with 10 games still to play. As far as the Blades are concerned, well, that slip up in midweek, a draw at home to Bristol City, was not expected, shall we say?
Yeah, I mean, Sheffield Wednesday, they're actually 5 points off now. They've won their last 2 games. They had been on a poor run before, then got the game at Plymouth that they won comfortably 3-0, and then in a remarkable game on Tuesday away to Norwich, where they were 2-0 down at half time, come back to win 3-2 there. They're just the latest side that have taken points off of Norwich after Norwich have been leading. I mean, Norwich have just been giving so many points away. But in terms of Sheffield United, you're right. They were pegged back late on in that game against Bristol City. I'm watching, looking at that game, I think they couldn't have any complaints over the outcome, really. Bristol City had a lot of control in the game and were well worth at least a point. So Chris Wilder was very honest after the game. He said that his Sheffield United team were not really at the races in that game and couldn't have any complaints over the outcome. They have had a few more injuries kind of popping up a game. Gus Hamer was a doubt. He was, fit enough to come off the bench, but they're still missing the 2 first choice right back Sheffield United. And I would just worry going into a tough derby game, and Sheffield Wednesday have got those playoff hopes now rekindled again. They're in the scramble. And I think sometimes in these derby games as well, the home advantage can be a little bit underestimated, shall we say. I'm going to edge towards Sheffield Wednesday to win this game. The draw in these derbies is always a big runner. I know both teams are going to want to win. Sheffield United needs to try and keep Burnley at bay and make ground on Leeds in the race for the top 2. But if you offer them the draw, would they take it? Possibly. Sheffield Wednesday may be more of an incentive to go for the win to bridge that 5-point gap. I think Sheffield Wednesday may just edge it.
Well, it's 29-20 for Wednesday, 23-10 the draw, and 15-8 Sheffield United. Just to note as well that 3 of the last 4 games between these two sides have finished in draws, so it might well be that it's going to be another tight affair at Hillsborough on Sunday.
I'll just mention that, if I didn't say the tip, just to take that draw out of the equation and back Sheffield Wednesday on the draw no bet.
That is Dan's thoughts then on the Sheffield derby on Sunday. As ever now, time for Dan's 3 EFL selections. I think I'm right in saying, Dan, that all 3 came in last week. Yeah,
got 3 winners last week. Got Mansfield in despite them failing to win again, but backed them not to lose. So that was a decent one. Wimbledon, I think, was one of the other ones, and Sheffield United, I think, was the third one. But hopefully we can go well again here. We'll start off with the Championship. Going to go with Luton, draw no bet, at home to Middlesbrough, fighting for their lives. Luton at the bottom of the table. Got a rare away win on Tuesday. Fell behind away to Cardiff and came back to get a 2-1 win. That's a massive result for Luton. It just keeps them, I think they're only now 2 points from safety. Quite recently got a 1-0 win at home to Portsmouth that they dug out as well. Generally, their home form is a lot stronger than what they do at home. It's a tight pitch, small ground. They bomb balls into the boxes. There's not a great deal of science to it, but they're physical. They've got good delivery. Alfie Doughty, often the man that puts the deliveries in, and with the likes of Carlton Morris and maybe Adebayo coming off the bench, they're a handful. And I worry for Middlesbrough here. They've lost 5 of their last 6 away games. That at the moment haven't even got a fit central defender. They play without a recognised centre back at home to QPR midweek. They won the game 2-1. QPR scored a goal from a cross into the box that Middlesbrough didn't deal with, but I think they'll be dealing with a lot more crosses here. I would fancy Luton to get the result. Secondly, going to go with the League One relegation battle between Cambridge and Peterborough. This is a bit of a derby game as well, but a little bit more riding on it due to their positions in the table. Peterborough fancy to win the game. They've improved since kind of January. They did some business. Their defence was awful in the first part of the season. They brought Sam Hughes, a centre-back, in on loan from Stockport. Carl Johnson, a right back they brought in from Fleetwood as well. They've tightened up at the back, Peterborough. There's still a threat going forward. They've got Kwame Poku's come back into the mix now. He came off the bench last weekend in a 1-1 draw at home to Wycombe. He is one of the best attacking players in the whole of the division. So they're on a decent run, Peterborough, and I think they'll have too much for Cambridge, who have lost 3 in a row, and they're looking doomed really for relegation. Going to finish off in League Two. MK Dons, I'm going to back to avoid defeat away to Port Vale. Now, there's a lot more riding on this for Port Vale. They're 6th in the division. MK Dons are 18th. But Port Vale have had no win in the last 4 games. That includes a 0-0 draw at home to Harrogate. They're struggling at the moment for performances and creating chances. And MK, they've really underperformed this season. Scott Lindsay, a manager at a rate, he paid the price and left. Ben Gladwin took over as interim manager, and he's getting a bit of a tune out of them. They won 2-1 at home to Morecambe last week. There's a kind of reason behind it. They've been getting defenders back. They were light at the back, but Lawrence Maguire, key centre-back, was back in the side last weekend. Luke Offord has recently returned from injury as well. So they're much more solid at the back. When you go into a tough game at Port Vale, it gives you a platform to maybe soak it up and then go on and get a result. So MK will draw a double chance in that one.
Okay, well, just to remind you of the 3 tips in the EFL for Dan this week: Luton, Peterborough and MK Dons double chance. And it's time now for Mark's turn as he takes us through his Bet Builder. And Mark, I think this week's Bet Builder is going to focus on the EFL Cup final.
Yeah, I think it's got to, really, isn't it? It's the biggest game of the weekend. You're going to go for Liverpool to lift the trophy. There's 23 points between them and Newcastle in the standings, and I think that probably will be played out at Wembley. Not expecting a high-scoring game, so under 4 goals in 90 minutes. 10 of the last 11 EFL Cup finals have been under sort of 3.5 goals in terms of the 90 minutes. And I'm going for Liverpool to gain the most corners. Newcastle missing a key threat in Anthony Gordon, who's suspended. But also, I was just looking at the head-to-head between Liverpool and Newcastle. It's probably just bizarre and just something that can't carry on forever. But Liverpool have had more corners than Newcastle in their last 18 meetings against them, and they've had 27 more corners than them this season. So it comes out that Bet Builder at bigger than 2-1. So not the biggest one we've put up this season, but 3 sort of components that I like.
Okay, well, that's Mark's Bet Builder then for the EFL Cup final this Sunday. Time to turn our attentions now to the prop shop. What we're looking at here, Mark? Yeah,
I think the bookmakers listen into this prop shop. You put somebody up and then the price collapses the next week. So Philogene did the business for us at Selhurst Park last week, but now I wanted to put him up again for Ipswich, and the price has collapsed now. So we're going to have to head elsewhere. We're going to go to Goodison Park. Mohamed Kudus to have a shot on target, roundabout evens. He's had 11 shots in his last 4 matches, taking a lot of responsibility in the final third for the Hammers. And I thought it was a tougher week this week, but Kudus evens was fair enough.
Yeah, as a new addition to my fantasy league team, I'm hoping that certainly comes in terms of Mohamed Kudus this weekend. We're going to turn our attentions now to the best bets overall. We'll start, of course, with the assist treble this week. Dan, we'll start with your pick first for the treble.
Yeah, going to go with Peterborough to win their League One relegation battle away to Cambridge. 6 games undefeated now. Peterborough. That includes the EFL Trophy semi-final away to Wrexham. Really tough game that they came from behind in and went through on penalties. So they're certainly playing a lot better now, Peterborough, and they're up against the Cambridge side. 3 defeats in a row and look like they're heading for League Two.
I think you're going continental, Mark, aren't you, this week?
Yeah, the Claudio Ranieri derby. So Roma to beat Cagliari. Ranieri has really turned Roma around. 6 wins on the spin. Speaking before their sort of second leg of the Europa League against Athletic in Bilbao on Thursday. Cagliari have lost 9 of the last 15. Always slightly concerned by the fact that quick turnaround for these Europa League teams. But what I would say is that Roma are not without a sort of hope here of qualifying for the Champions League domestically. So I don't think they can just sort of throw the league away. So Ranieri to beat one of his many former clubs.
Okay, and I'm going to go into League Two, and I'm going with Grimsby to beat Salford, who I was surprised were odds against, to be honest with you, at Blundell Park. 11-10 for Grimsby. They did lose 2-0 at home to Notts County in midweek, but it is just 1 place and 1 point outside the playoffs at the moment for the Mariners. And prior to that game against promotion chasing Notts County, they'd gone 8 games without defeat. And they face a Salford side who haven't won in 6 now and were thumped 4-0 at home by Chesterfield on Tuesday. You imagine confidence is low in their camp at the minute as their playoff chances seem to be slipping away. So Grimsby at 11-10 for me. So just a reminder of the assist treble this week: Roma, Peterborough and Grimsby. And all that remains now is to get the naps this week from Mark and Dan. And Mark, we'll start with your nap first.
Yeah, I was going to go for Celtic against Rangers. So I couldn't put anyone off that price. But a similar sort of price, just a shade of odds on, I am going to go for Manchester United to beat Leicester yet again. They've done well against them this season. They haven't done well against too many teams this season, Man United, but they have knocked Leicester out of both cups. And actually, if you have a look at their record against the bottom 3, United have collected 13 points from a possible 15. Now, I think that says a lot about the teams at the bottom of the Premier League. And Leicester just so little up front that it might only take 1 United goal to win this.
Okay, and what about your nap, Dan? Who are you looking at here?
Yeah, going to go with MK Dons or draw double chance in the League Two fixture at Port Vale. Looks like the shackles are almost off now, MK Dons, after Scott Lindsay getting the sack. They played with more freedom in a 2-1 win at home to Morecambe last weekend. They've had a free week. Port Vale haven't. They went to Colchester midweek and lost 2-1. No winning 4 now for Port Vale. I'm not so sure they'll win this weekend either.
Okay, well, big thanks to both Dan and Mark for all their efforts as usual on this week's assist. Don't forget, of course, plenty of other video and podcasts to look forward to across the Racing Post channels this week, with it being Cheltenham, of course. And, of course, each Tuesday we also have the Sweet Spot with all your golf information and tips from Steve Palmer as well. It's the international break, as we said, next week, so there's no assist. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time. Thomas Tuchel has got his hands full, of course, with his first England fixtures in the meantime. We wish him the best of luck. But in the meantime, you enjoy your football this weekend. And please remember to gamble responsibly.